Imagine a courtroom, but wipe away the wood paneling, the judge's bench, the smell of stale coffee.
Right, none of the usual stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Instead, picture a clearing deep in a jungle. The air is thick, it's humid, and the plaintiffs, they aren't people in suits. They're the natural world itself. We're talking insects, household pets, livestock, and primates, all gathering to give testimony against humanity.
It is a striking image, and it really sets the stage for a very unusual deep dive today. We're covering a piece called The Awakening, Chapter 5, The Testimony Begins.
Yeah, by Mahendra Shah. And just to be completely clear for everyone listening right now, this isn't a transcript of a real legal trial.
Right, though that would certainly be the trial of the century.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's a narrative piece. It's an allegory that uses this idea of a council of beings to vocalize the ecological crisis we're living through. It's essentially giving a literal voice to the voiceless.
Which is an incredibly powerful literary device. I mean, it forces us to step outside our anthropocentric, our human-centered viewpoint.
Right.
In the text, the scene is set with this eerie stillness. The usual noise of the jungle just stops. The wind dies down. Leaves drop without any apparent reason.
Yeah.
And then a central figure, a character named Dugu, walks right into the center of the circle.
And he says just one word.
Enough.
Enough. I gotta say, that gave me chills when I read it.
Yeah.
It feels like such a heavy word in this context. It's not just, stop. It's we are at capacity. The line has been crossed.
Precisely. And the mission of our deep dive today is to unpack exactly why they've had enough. We're going to look at the specific grievances presented by 4 distinct groups in this text.
The insects, the pets, the livestock, and the primates.
Exactly. And finally, we'll analyze the Universal Declaration of Nature Rights that is proposed at the very end of the gathering.
I am really excited about this one because, frankly, who hasn't looked at their dog or their cat and wondered, what are you thinking?
All the time.
Right. But in this story, the animals aren't just thinking about treats or going for walks. They're thinking about justice.
It is fascinating. And while the setup is entirely fictional, the data and the philosophical arguments that are embedded in their speeches, those are very real.
Yeah.
And quite confronting, honestly. This isn't a fairy tale. It's a manifesto wrapped in a story.
So let's just jump right in. The testimony begins, but it doesn't start with the lions or the elephants or, the glamour animals that we put on T-shirts and logos.
No, it doesn't.
It starts with the insects. The text calls them the ground itself.
Which is biologically appropriate, actually. Insects are the absolute foundation of terrestrial ecosystems.
Right.
If they collapse, everything above them, birds, small mammals, and eventually us, it all falls. The first to speak in the text is a bee.
And she does not hold back at all. She brings up this massive paradox regarding modern agriculture.
Yeah.
She says, and I'm paraphrasing a bit here, she says, you spray chemicals and wonder why your apples shrink.
Yeah, it's the pollinator's dilemma, the central paradox of modern farming. We use these harsh chemicals to protect crops from pests. But those exact same chemicals often kill the pollinators that those crops actually depend on to grow fruit in the first place.
Wow.
The bee notes a really critical statistic here. Over 75% of global crops depend on pollinators.
75%. That's 3 out of every 4 bites of food, essentially.
Yes.
If you like coffee, almonds, berries, whatever, you need a bee to land on a flower.
Correct. And yet the bee testifies that millions of hives are lost every single year. The real aha moment in her testimony, for me at least, was when she clarifies their motivation.
Oh, yeah.
She says they don't want praise. They aren't doing this for power or recognition. They literally just want to do their job, building, carrying, cleaning, feeding, without being poisoned while they work.
It's the humility of it that really gets me. They're like the ultimate essential workers who are being actively hindered by management.
That's a great way to put it.
And speaking of essential workers, we got to talk about the cleanup crew. Because the text highlights the dung beetle and the termites next.
This was such a vital part of the testimony. Now, the dung beetle, he acknowledges that humans look down on him.
Literally and figuratively.
Exactly. He lives in waste. He carries dirt. He knows he's considered gross by our standards. But he flips that narrative completely on its head. He points out that without them, the soil stops breathing.
Breathing. That's such a vivid way to put it. Breathing soil.
It is. Think about what decomposers actually do. They turn waste into future growth. If they stop working, things just rot where they fall.
The cycle just breaks.
The nutrient cycle completely breaks down, yes. The beetle's argument is that the ground is only healthy when it can take in what's been left behind. And that is the specific service they provide day in and day out.
Right.
They are the reason we aren't wading through a literal wasteland.
So we have the pollinators ensuring we have food, and the cleaners ensuring we don't live in filth. But then there's the ladybug. Now, usually we think of ladybugs as cute, the whole fly away home nursery rhyme vibe. But her testimony was actually about pest control and the vicious cycle that humans create.
Right. She explains it very simply. You plant a crop, a pest arrives to eat it. So you spray broad-spectrum chemicals.
As we do.
Right. And those chemicals kill the pest, sure. But they also kill the predators, like the ladybug, who are naturally there to eat the pest anyway.
It's like firing the police force because there was a robbery.
That is a perfect analogy. So the next year, the soil is weaker from the chemicals and the natural predators are completely gone.
Right.
The pests come back, but now there's no ladybug to eat them. So the infestation is worse than before.
Yeah.
And what do you humans do?
Spray more chemicals?
Spray more chemicals. It's a self-defeating loop, an arms race against nature that we can't really win.
Yeah. And then the testimony moves to habitat loss, which is voiced by the mosquito and the butterfly. Now, I know the mosquito is a pretty hard sell for sympathy.
Yeah, the text even acknowledges that. The mosquito literally says, I know how we're seen. I know nobody likes me.
True. But she argues that they are forced into human spaces because their natural habitats, the wetlands and the wild places, are drained or poisoned.
It's an issue of displacement.
Exactly. But the butterfly's testimony is perhaps the most heartbreaking part regarding habitat. She notes that between 2000 and 2020, in one country alone, butterfly numbers dropped by over 22%.
That is a massive drop. That's nearly a quarter of the population gone in just 2 decades.
Yeah. And she specifically calls out fake lawns and plastic flowers.
Yes. This is a direct critique of our aesthetic choices. Humans create spaces that look tidy to the human eye.
Right, the manicured grass.
Manicured grass, artificial plants, paved patios. But to an insect, those spaces are deserts.
Wow.
There is no food, there's no nectar, no shelter. The butterfly says, they praised our beauty, but they didn't protect what we needed to stay.
Oof, that hits home. We love the aesthetic of nature. We print butterflies on our wallpaper, but we strip away the actual function of the environment they need.
That is the core of the insect testimony right there. They are asking for functional respect. They remind the assembly, we are not the noise in the background. We are the ground itself. If you pull the rug out, the furniture falls.
Okay, so that's the foundation. Now the scene shifts. And this part is complex because it deals with the animals we actually claim to love, the pets.
Yes, the text calls this section the bridge. The dogs, cats, parrots, and rabbits.
Right.
They occupy a really unique position because they live inside the human world. They are the only ones who see us with our guard completely down.
The dog and the cat testify that humans are capable of incredible love. They talk about being fed, being spoken to like family, even healed when they're sick. The cat actually mentions that some humans talk to them more than they talk to other humans.
I think a lot of listeners can relate to that. I certainly can.
Oh, absolutely.
But here is where it gets really interesting conceptually. The pests argue that this empathy is strictly gated.
Gated empathy. Let's unpack that a bit.
It means the human ability to care stops at the front door. The dog explains that humans treat pets like family, but they forget about the world outside.
Yeah.
The rabbit adds that humans close themselves off from the rest of nature. It's a glaring contradiction. How can a species be so deeply kind to a cat on a sofa, yet so totally indifferent to the ecosystem that actually sustains that cat?
It's like we have a limited bandwidth for empathy, and we just spend it all on the animals we've named.
Right.
If it has a name tag, we save it. If it doesn't, we pave over it.
Exactly. And the verdict from the pests isn't that humans are evil. It's that they're disconnected. The pets argue that they aren't toys or property, but ambassadors.
Ambassadors.
Yeah, they view themselves as diplomats from the wild, trying to help show humans the way back to connecting with nature.
I gotta say, I love the idea of my dog being an ambassador for the wilderness. Though honestly, mostly he just seems to be an ambassador for naps and treats.
Fair enough.
But I get the point. They are the living proof that we can care. The capacity is clearly there, it's just misapplied.
Precisely. But now, as we move through the text, the tone of the gathering shifts dramatically. We move from the living room to the industrial farm.
Yeah. This is the testimony of the cows, pigs, chickens, goats, and sheep. And I have to say, this got heavy really fast. It feels like the air was just sucked out of the room.
It has to. The scale of this issue is immense. The cow steps forward and drops a staggering statistic. In the United States alone, 1 million of these animals are killed every hour.
Every hour. That number is as hard to even wrap your head around that.
Every single hour. It frames the sheer magnitude of industrial agriculture in a way that's hard to ignore.
And what struck me is that they weren't necessarily complaining about the fact that they are eaten.
No.
Because they acknowledged that predation is part of life. Wolves eat sheep, that's nature. Their complaint was about the industrialization of their existence.
Correct. It's about the lack of balance. The hen talks about being kept in tiny spaces, forced to grow unnaturally fast, never seeing daylight.
Yeah.
It's the total reduction of a living being to a unit of production. It's treating a biological creature like a car part on an assembly line. And the goat brings up a very specific, very modern grievance: cloning.
Yeah, this part was wild. They brought up specific real-world examples. Dolly and Idaho Jim.
They did. Dolly the sheep, the famous clone from the 90s.
I remember Dolly, for sure. But I hadn't actually heard of Idaho Gem before reading this source.
Idaho Gem was the first mule clone specifically for racing. The animals in the text argue that these are lives made in labs to be studied, not lived.
What actually happened to them? The text sort of hints they didn't do well.
Well, Dolly aged prematurely. She developed severe arthritis and lung disease much younger than a normal sheep would.
Wow.
The testimony points out that she was essentially born old. The animals use this as hard evidence of progress without thought.
It's the classic Jurassic Park argument, isn't it? Just because we can do it doesn't mean we stop to think if we should.
Exactly. The goat puts it as creating the code of life like software. Copying and pasting without respecting the integrity of the animal itself.
Right.
Their plea is really for a return to common sense and fairness. They aren't asking to rule the world. They're just asking not to be built to suffer for human efficiency.
It's such a powerful plea. So we've heard from the ground crew, the household companions, and the industrial workforce. Now we get to our closest relatives, the primates.
The chimpanzees and the monkeys. And this is where the conversation moves from laying out grievances to actual legal strategy.
Yeah.
These are the animals used in testing, training, even space exploration. They know us best.
The chimp starts by holding up a mirror to humanity. He references something humans are actually quite proud of, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Yes, which was established by the UN about 70 years ago. The chimp notes that humans spoke of fairness, freedom, and dignity. But he points out the glaring hypocrisy. Humans still struggle to respect the rights of their own kind. There is still war, poverty, oppression among humans. So, logically, how can they possibly be trusted with other species?
It's a very fair point. If we can't even treat other humans well, what hope does a chimp have?
And this leads to the central proposal of the entire text. The chimp calls for a universal declaration of nature rights to exist right alongside human rights.
So let's stop here for a second and look at that. What does that actually mean in practice? Is it just saying, hey, be nice to trees? Or is there a real framework here?
No, it's much more structured than that. The expert testimony here, voiced by the chimp, breaks down the consequences of ignoring these rights into 3 distinct categories:
Okay.
ecological, social, and economic. This is the real so what factor for any humans listening in the story.
All right, let's unpack those. Ecological seems the most obvious one.
It is, but the chimp explains the mechanism behind it. It's about system collapse. When species disappear, you lose the helpers.
Like the pollinators we talked about earlier.
Exactly. The pollinators, the decomposers. Losing them leads to climate instability. Heat waves, droughts, floods. It's the physical breakdown of the planet's life support systems.
Yeah.
It's not just, oh, it's hotter outside. It's the weather is now hostile to life.
Right. But then he pivots to the social consequences. And this is where it gets genuinely scary for humans specifically.
This connects the environment directly to human stability. The chimp argues that pollution naturally leads to disease. But more than that, resource scarcity leads to conflict.
Right. People don't just sit around.
Exactly. When water becomes hard to find or when soil can't grow food, people don't just sit there. They move and they fight.
He says poverty will rise and people will compete for food, water, and space. It takes these environmental issues and turns them into immediate national security issues.
Exactly. If you think the world is unstable now, imagine it with half the water and half the arable land.
Terrifying.
And finally, the economic consequences. This is the language that policymakers usually actually listen to.
Money talks.
It always does. The testimony outlines that the cost of disasters destroys infrastructure. Homes, roads, power lines.
Yeah.
Healthcare costs skyrocket because of pollution-related illnesses.
Yeah.
And food prices rise exponentially as farming becomes more and more difficult.
So the argument really is, even if you don't care about the monkey or the butterfly emotionally, you should absolutely care about your wallet and your safety.
Precisely. The chimp sums it up by saying the damage to nature affects how people earn, how they live, and how they plan ahead. It's a completely holistic argument. You cannot have a healthy economy on a dying planet. It is physically impossible.
It's such a comprehensive takedown. You have the insects arguing from the bottom up, based on biological necessity.
Right.
The pets arguing from the emotional center, connection. The farm animals arguing against industrial cruelty, so ethics. And the primates arguing from a socioeconomic and legal perspective, which is pure survival.
It covers all the bases perfectly, and it all happens in this quiet jungle clearing led by Dugu.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I really want to go back to the ending of the text. Because after all this testimony, after all the facts and the pleas, the story ends with a poem.
Yes. It's an incredibly haunting way to close the proceedings. The text says, "Halt the violation of nature. The web of life, when torn apart, will leave a wound upon the heart."
A wound upon the heart. I mean, it's poetic, obviously, but based on everything we've discussed today, the collapsing bee colonies, the flood risks, the resource scarcity, it's also quite literal.
Yes.
A literal wound on the heart of our civilization.
And notice the title of the chapter again. The testimony begins. This heavily implies that this is just the opening statement. The verdict is yet to be delivered.
That is a chilling thought. We are currently waiting for the jury to decide. And the jury is, well, physics and biology, I guess.
And they're very strict judges. They don't accept bribes. And they really don't care about quarterly profits.
Indeed, they don't. You know, this source material presents all of this as a fictional gathering, a talking dog, a chimp quoting human rights law. But the data, the 75% of crops, the 22% butterfly drop, the 1 million livestock killed per hour, all of that is real.
It is absolute fact disguised as fiction. The allegory is just the delivery mechanism for the hard truth.
So here's the thought I want to leave you with today. We treat this story as a fantasy simply because animals can't speak our language. But if the natural world actually could speak to us tomorrow, if your dog or the squirrel in the park or the bee on your windowsill could actually talk to you in plain English, would we actually change our behavior? Or would we just try to capture the talking dog and put it on a late-night talk show?
That is the ultimate question. Is it a lack of communication or a lack of will? Are we failing to understand, or are we just refusing to listen?
Something to really think about next time you're walking past a tidy lawn or shooing away a fly. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into the awakening.
It's been a pleasure.
See you next time.